Our guests this evening are Brian West from Signal Warner FreeSWITCH, Anthony Minessale from Signal Warner FreeSWITCH, Michael Jerris, Signal Warner FreeSWITCH, Liviu Chircu, OpenSIPS, Jachen Duschletta, Homer in the end. Daniel, Mierla, Kamailio, and last but not least, Fred Posner, a friend of the Kamailio community and open source expert, I would say. Welcome, everybody. And thank you for joining us. So I think we don't have a real agenda for the discussion, but there's something I'd like to start with. Maybe a quick round of introductions about your respective projects and what you've been doing, so the few people who don't know you could start from there. And then maybe we'll start looking at what I think is the most important aspect in open source projects today, which is maintenance in the sense of financial survivability of projects. Like, how do we ensure these important projects where entire industries are based upon keep going and growing and helping people build their own businesses? So, but let's first start with introductions. I'll do the reverse order, so Fred first.
Why? Hi, I'm Fred Posner. I'm a longtime user of open source. Started using Kamailio back in early 2000s. Was very excited to join the project about 2 or 3 years ago, I think. And mostly work with Kamailio, still work with FreeSWITCH and Asterisk as well.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Daniel, and yeah, for the past 20 or over 20 years, I'm doing this SIP routing proxy-like application called now Kamailio. Started as a SIP Express router somewhere in Berlin, Germany. So yeah, 20 years doing more or less same boring stuff.
Hi, I'm Jachen Duschletta. I'm representing the Homer project, which is a VoIP monitoring software, and it's been around for a long time, from what I understand, and it's being used extensively.
Thank you.
Hi, I am Liviu Chircu. I'm with the OpenSIPS project, and I'm a developer, a C developer at the core. Actually, my journey with open source started kind of in a reverse way, where I started from software engineering, right? Just I enjoyed the low-level coding of C and got into OpenSIPS as in my third year of college, and then slowly started opening up to the open source world and everything that's going on there, and completely embraced it, and I never looked back since. That's 10 years since I started.
Thank you.
I'm Michael Jerris. I was talking to Tony, I think just about 20 years ago. I stumbled into an IRC channel where I had some questions about how to implement something for a call center solution. And Tony and this guy Brian were like, "Oh, we've got this conference bridge, just call us." And it wasn't long after that that I was working with these two. And a couple years after that, 2 or 3 years after that, FreeSWITCH became a thing. So the better part of the last 2 decades I've spent with these guys and just making cool stuff.
Thank you.
I'm Anthony. I started out doing web hosting, and I got my first open source thing was probably the Apache web server, and I was lucky if I could even build it back then. And once I did, I was like, cool, this feeling is cool. I like created something. I was just building it, and then literally like compiling someone else's code was exciting to me. And then I was like, well, maybe I can make my own too, and then started doing it a little bit, and got into the community, and started doing contributing to Asterisk for many years, and then got inspired to create FreeSWITCH one day. So next thing you know, it's like 20 more years later, and now we can look back on it and talk about it.
And here we are.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'm Brian West. I also had a start at a local ISP doing tech support. We needed a phone system. I stumbled into Asterisk, met Tony. I worked with Tony for a good 6 months. He tried to hire me. and you know, I was pretty content with where I was at. The ISP got bought out. He hired me the next day, and you know, started working on Astros for multiple years, and then FreeSWITCH or ClueCon FreeSWITCH, and here we are.
Nice, thank you. Well, this is kind of like a super ClueCon weekly episode for me, because for people who don't know, we're on this weekly podcast about open source. And having this many important people on stage for me is great. And I want to start by saying that many of us in the room, including myself, probably got to start through one of your projects. I'm here through the way of making patches to a Ruby framework to support FreeSWITCH. It was only supporting Asterisk. I contributed this open source Ruby framework called Adhesion at the time to support FreeSWITCH, and here I am. I was doing something totally different. I was implementing database systems at the time. So I think what's important to start from the discussion is probably I will look at how we ensure projects keep going. And I'd be curious to hear what each one of the projects is doing to make sure they keep going, how the communities manage, how much contributions you're getting, if there's anything the communities at large should be doing better. That kind of discussion, I think, is ultimately very helpful. Maybe but we'll change orders each time, so maybe we'll start with the FreeSWITCH area.
Okay. Go ahead and ask the question again.
So how do we ensure FreeSWITCH keeps existing?
That is a fun task. A lot of it in the beginning was community engagement. You know, you mentioned going into the conference. We did that, you know, for years, where you could just drop by. And we do that now. We have a thing called office hours. If you don't know what that is, you know, subscribe to our website. Keep an eye on our announcements. We do still do the community hours, or the office hours for the community as well. So you can come in and talk to us. And I think that engagement is one of the key things that we've focused on over the years that has helped drive the project forward. Get engagement, get the word out, what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, keeping the lights on is not easy. You have this kind of endless thing to keep up with all the things around you. Like you're kind of held to the standards of like, okay, we're making software. What operating system are they for? Like every one of those operating systems has a goal to upgrade themselves every 5 years minimum, right? And so the operating system is really just a collection of software packages, and especially in Linux and open source land, all those things are open source. So like you have someone's entire job it is just to make a Linux distro, which is basically like arranging out like all of these different softwares and libraries and things and to be coherent with each other. And then you have us that would have to build, we're one of those packages, but we also use a lot of those dependencies as well. And you know, it's like we started out building our own. Like in the old days, there wasn't much for packages were kind of new and they didn't work right, and it was like, never mind, just download Tarball, and like we'd build it, and then you'd fall in love with this version because it works every time, but then all of a sudden there's security problems in it, and it's like, well, we're not consuming this library from the people that make it, we just downloaded it and kept it in a Tarball somewhere, and now we have to get a new version of that Tarball. Oh wait, it doesn't even compile anymore, and like you get in all these headaches. And for a while there, like we were just driven to succeed, so we were, you know, doing that kind of too much, and it's been, I think we're 10 years still into trying to shed some of that. Like we used to just have this like mentality, you want to make sure it builds, but then we're taking on the world on our back of also like making the software build and all the dependencies that go with it build too, and we kind of got better at like figuring out how to work together with, say, the operating system's natural version of some of those libraries. But then the cross side of that is they change it a lot, and now you have to change your code to keep up with them. So it's like a double-edged sword. So a lot of that stuff is super boring, and like no one really thinks about how hard it is, but that like eats up like the majority of the time, really.
So managing dependencies is important.
I'll double down an even more boring part of it. We've put, probably the last few years, we've put significant resources into testing. And we have continuous integration, and every PR goes through our continuous integration and runs our test suite, looking for memory leaks and buffer overflows. We've spent a massive amount of time trying to make everything work well, reliably, not crash. And be repeatable. So we have testing, we can refactor something, we can implement a new feature without risk of it failing. So we've spent a ton of time focusing on that. And we've also spent, like he was talking about, not dealing with dependencies. We've gone through and removed some stuff because some things that were interesting a few years ago maybe aren't that interesting. Google Talk is much less interesting because it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
We put a ton of energy into that, and it doesn't matter anymore. There's a bunch of dependency effort that went in there, and the code's still around, but it's really not useful for anyone anymore. So we've spent a bunch of time making everything. It makes the build easier, makes maintenance easier, makes the code more reliable. So real boring on the outside, but end result is you can actually use this stuff and deploy it big and not have your stuff crash. And now that we're more of a consumer of our own software too, on a daily basis, the pain of a crash is significant, is customer impacting, and impacts our revenue. So we've done some great work on that, and the stuff works way better because of it.
Amazing. Thank you. Liviu.
The thing that comes to my mind when discussing what are the things or the major parts that drive project success. For ours, for the OpenSIPS community, I think it's, let me sum it up as communication. And it's a two-way deal, right? First, we have our communication from the developer side towards the community. And by this, we have documentation. And we put constant work into making sure it's well structured, because there are a lot of versions being pushed out, and people still need to find the proper references and make sure, we have to make sure that it's properly formulated, right? There are no things missing, like return codes or parameter types. There are all sorts of ways in which you can write sloppy documentation. And I think that drives the ball home because we get often a lot of praise on the quality of the docs. Also, definitely worth mentioning is the packaging. And Luca, you were mentioning like the people that get involved, and here we are fortunate enough to have this completely outsourced by our good friend Nick Altman.
Oh, yeah.
So he takes care of the build infrastructure and has some daily builds that pick up the latest commits and make sure that debs and RPMs and all that stuff get built for various platforms and various versions, right? It's a whole matrix of builds that are going on. So that is our communication towards the community. Oh, maybe also worth mentioning are the blog posts and tutorials, because we constantly push some of those out, and it's nice to see people on the mailing lists with references to the blog. Hey, I followed your blog and built this integration starting from it. And then there's the other side of the communication, which is from the community. And that is also important, to make sure you follow up with all the channels where questions get asked. And so by this pretty much are the mailing lists and GitHub in our case. And we make sure to tend to those as well. And personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the closed garden style of Slack, because all of the questions that we answer there, or the entire community takes the time to answer there, guess what? Unfortunately, they're not indexable. Nobody will be able to look back on those references. And honestly, when I have to pick between a Slack question and the mailing list question, my answer is pretty obvious. I'll go for the mailing list first. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's a very good point, I think.
Yeah. I would say that sums up my communication.
Thank you. Is it on? Jachen.
One thing that I think was always important for open source was, or at least from a Homer side, is to have a strong product design. Like we have an idea of what we would like that software to look like, and being able to communicate that and keep it in a certain way, I think it has really helped adoption, because you don't have to relearn Homer every time a new version comes out. There will be elements that are very similar. There will be elements that are going to be familiar. And our goal has always been to keep it in a way that people actually want to use it. And some open source project that I came across in the past, their goal was to build something that's incredible, but the UI and UX experience just doesn't follow suit. And so having a balance between the both, I think, is always something that's helpful. And then obviously on the commercial side, like we at QuickSIP have this Robin Hood model, and it's just almost the only way to keep it going, because you need some kind of influx of you know,
revenue.
Yeah, you need something to be able to spend that time to give back to the community. But yeah, we treat open source the same as we treat commercial clients, and we just focus on trying to find a solution that's usable for everyone, and not necessarily always that's an individual, you know, might have a very specific problem, but we try to help them find their own solution and keep it open and usable for everyone, and not make it too complex, I guess.
Yeah, that's important.
Okay, so to keep a project keep going from like maintainer developer
for
point
20
of view,
years.
20 years. Yeah, it's one very important thing with two options. Be sure your wife has a good job or works with you. So in the first case, he doesn't care about income. In the other case, it's not only your fault. Now on the serious side, so yeah, you have to adapt and adjust your goals depending on the phase of your project and the market. So the most important, I think, was over the years for our project was like this predictability on the evolution, like having a release every 8, 10, maybe 1 year, but being sure it's going to be there, having some meetings that the community can participate, and of course identifying where the market goes, because if you just build it for a hobby, as I said, then you need a wife with a very good job. If you want to, and in my case, we both work with this project, so the entire family relies on that. Then you have to identify what's next in the market and somehow come before your competition, which has more financial capabilities. And I'm not talking about other projects in open source space. I talk about in telecom, there are big vendors with billions of funding that they can invest in projects, in developers, and so on. And also be flexible enough, and I think in open source, in telecom, or real-time communication is where we actually exceed a lot, having this flexibility to adjust even without the developer thinking that's needed to be addressed, like, well, this XML scripting language, or, you know, this flexibility, I think, was key, although could be a steep learning curve, but when you get there, you figure out that someone announced a new feature and you think it's cool to have it, but actually it's there. It's just you didn't configure it or didn't script it yet. So yeah, these are my thoughts at this moment about keep going with open source projects. It's important to identify the sources either as developer or income for support by being a little bit ahead of where the market is going to go.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say Fred's hat says happy wife, happy life. So I think that's probably a Kamailio thing. That
I was thinking of Tony's because they have to work together. As well, not only my person.
Yeah, my wife doesn't work in open source. I mean, my perspective is different. I'm not a founder or a developer, so I got into Kamailio by just being part of the community. So my take is to keep a project going, and interest is to make sure that other people will feel welcomed, right? Because you know, we don't have corporate sponsorship to pay for everything that we would like, and so we need to encourage contributions, we need to encourage feedback, and to try to be, you know, Daniel's provided a great footprint for being very transparent in how we communicate where projects are going, why decisions were made, and we try to encourage that with, you know, the mailing list. We have an active mailing list. I'm a big fan of also trying to use the mailing list because it's searchable, which makes it easy for other people. We have a matrix channel that does have some historical aspects, you know, versus closed Slack type of thing, and you know, this way we own it. I know Homer has a glitter, but it's matrix, and you know, but just encouraging the community, encouraging people to be nice to each other, everything like that.
Yeah, thank you. I think you introduced a very good point, which is where I wanted to go next. So ClueCon Weekly is a question that always asks to maintainers and developers. How many contributors do you have outside of the core team, and how does the contribution process work? Like, there's many open source projects that are literally managed by like 2 people, and they're large. One comes to mind, probably Nginx, which is like that. There's a couple others where literally just a one band straw. And there are many others who have many outside contributors. So I'm curious what the balance is in that and how you manage the actual contributions.
I mean, now we rely on Git and GitHub. We are running our Git server for a while, but the main issue is with like providing access, and then it's coming to security when it comes to people that you don't know. And at least in Kamailio, we're very open always for contribution for even unknown people, to put it like that. By design, being modular, and we have now like over 150 or something like that, or 200 modules. And some of them overlap on purpose, and it's better to accept and make the people comfortable contributing rather than, you know, being very strict and maybe traveling and accepting patches very late. Of course, there is review. We have now continuous integration and compilation and so on. And then we have to identify, at least from my point of view, I care a lot about core and the common modules and the one that I use, but probably I don't use more than 50, 60 out of this, or not even half. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time testing all the possibilities for contributions to module I don't use. I just kind of trust it. And if it's crashing, then we have to solve it, because it's easier in this way, and new people feel more comfortable than being like under like police checking, hey, have you used that coding style, variable names. We have some policies for some consistency, but we are not very strict, because developers and contribution are sometimes rare, and it's better to just attract them than just make them feel unwelcome. So
that's a very good point. Never thought about it.
I mean, I think when you talk about numbers of contributors, what we have, like maybe 30 or 40 would push. You know, when we did the move, I like self-hosted stuff, so it was a whole big discussion with Kamailio to move to GitHub in the first place, but it does open it tremendously for other contributions. This being said, Dan has, I mean, the vast majority of
commits.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, there's modules, I think, that neither one of us have ever dreamed of touching, you know, and then, you know, there's multiple versions of Stir and Shake, and there's multiple versions of, LCR and gateways and all. But, you know, you have by far the vast majority of contributions. We have another, you know, Henning's pretty active, and some others are very active and take what you would call like a core, but I mean, we technically are open to any and all.
If it's like numbers, I haven't counted, but probably registered developers that they can just push code are over 50 right now. Otherwise, contribution with pull requests, I think we get like over 50% per year.
Oh, nice.
So we can look at the GitHub. I haven't checked, but something that we can look for.
Curious about Homer because it's a newer project with a heavy UI component, so it's.
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I think what we really appreciate is that anyone can come and contribute, and a lot of the contributions are also people trying to run it in different systems that maybe haven't been done before, and being able to give feedback on, hey, this is how I set it up, and it's, I made it work with this script, or I made it work with this configuration. And those things are always welcome, especially in, I'm sure Kamailio has probably something similar where you just have to configure it the right way sometimes to achieve something, and to get those back. Those are really valuable.
But you do have outside contributor activity.
Yes, I just don't know off the top.
Yeah, well, I mean, no number.
Yeah.
I mean, just, again, the division is very often where there are some very successful projects which literally just run by those 5 people. That's it. That's not the case. Thank you. Liviu. Oh, what? One mic or the other.
So first, I'm going to try to give you some numbers on the contributors and contributions. So the developer team on GitHub. Oh, by the way, short parenthesis here. OpenSIPS started on SourceForge actually, with SVN in 2007. And then, not sure, because I actually caught 1 year of that when I started. And, actually, was it 7, 8, something like that? 8, yeah. And then we moved to Git and GitHub. So right there, the team is of developers with push rights. I think it's maybe 20 or somewhere around those lines. But a good chunk of them, probably haven't pushed in a while. And nowadays, maybe we get like a few of them. Maybe Vlad Payu maybe pushes, or Liviu, or a couple others. But also a lot of them come from completely new contributors. Most of them will push a bug fix, right? They have this scenario and they run into some kind of issue, and they most often fix it themselves. And here I want to move forward to the second idea with the politics. And here I probably have a bit to learn from, or we have a bit to learn from Daniel as well, because we are on the opposite spectrum, right? We will nitpick you down.
Super strict.
Yeah, exactly. If you did this thing this way, there is a better way to do it, right? And we start the conversation. And while we probably think it's a good idea, right, and maybe that pull request will go through, right, the person will push a different...
In due time, yeah.
Yeah, but then they may not come back, right? So
Good point.
Yeah, you never know if you did the right thing by nitpicking.
I mean, we do check for the core components, main modules, but it's, again, allocating the resources for your interest or their interest. So it's the interest of the project, and by architecture is the same with FreeSWITCH, Kamailio, Asterix, modularity, it's everywhere, and that's good. When it's coming to like patch to the core, of course, all the lights are red and you check. But then when you have like 150 modules, and I haven't developed all this IMS mobile network extension myself, I do fixes based on C programming, but if someone adds a new feature, I don't know if it's implemented right. I can check, I see no memory leak and so on, but then is it doing based on the whatever IMS specs or a new ITF RFC that I haven't read? Not my business, right? If I don't use that module. But we do checks and compilation, continuous integration and so on.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mike.
I think we're going to tag team this one. I don't have numbers. You were talking about not part of the core team. The core team is large now. We have us, but also really driving the day-to-day. We've got, I guess, 3 people deep in the code, some of whom are in the room today, some of whom aren't. We have actual community resources, all of which we focus on. Chris in the room spent a ton of time spearheading a testing system which was a decade overdue, and did a ton of work on that. All of that drives into the ability for people to contribute and have CI tell people there's a problem with your code instead of us having to do that. That's been super helpful. It's allowed us to have a better conversation, kind of trying to thread the needle between the conversations they were having there. We wanted to improve code quality. We wanted to nitpick. We don't have the resources to pick it apart ourselves, but having a computer tell you that there's a problem with your stuff is so much easier and helpful for people than having to have that conversation. They fix it before they even get to you. So we did a ton there. We now have bodies enough that we can feed back to people, and that's important. We probably have some work to do too on the way we engage the community. And Brian, you have numbers?
Yeah, if you look at our overall contributors, overall since the project was conceived, Tony, Mike, and myself are still 1, 2, and 3 in the list, followed by Travis. Tony's done 11,732 commits, Mike's done 5,723, I've done 3,107. Tony's written 3.3 million lines of code and removed 1.6. Mike over here has done 5.5 million lines, removed 4.7 million.
Wow.
I've written 1.1 million lines of code and removed 406,000 lines of code.
Mike's the reaper of the project. They just take things
Well,
out.
you can tell what he was the dependency master.
Okay.
So that was when he was clearing out some of our dependencies. That's when he was ripping that out. And that's all in there as well.
Awesome. Well,
But you
Another
can-
interesting angle on PRs and contributions is sort of straight up like many of those contributions break everything, right? And then you have to find out if that's going to happen because it might compile and everything, but then like creates regressions, and my PRs create regressions. The communities do. Sometimes it's like you have to look at it as still valuable, even ones you reject. Sometimes it's like. Solves a language barrier. There could be someone that we speak 2 different languages, but we both speak C, so you can read the thing like, oh, I see what you're trying to do, but it's horribly wrong, but don't worry, we'll do it the right way since I can see why you were trying to do that. Other times it's like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool, we'll do that. It all depends on like, every case, and it's hard to like quantify that until you're doing it. But there's a lot of times when like, you have to figure out the impact of some of the changes sometimes. So it's sort of like, we've been on both sides of the fence, like I've had bugs open at WebRTC since 5 years sometimes. Yeah. And then I don't like to do that to our users, leave bugs open for a long time. So like we try to avoid that. Something that's been working well in the last couple of years is we encourage the unit tests to go with the patch. That way, like, they're making their own unit test. We'll commit it and we'll run that from now on. So like we know that the thing you were trying to do and what is working how it's supposed to. And then, because we might not even understand that at first. So like when you submit like a code change and an exercise unit test, then it speeds up things.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, there's another question I always ask at ClueCon Weekly, and it's people always a bit wary of it, but I will ask, what is one thing you need to fix in your current project? Like, is there one thing that you're not happy with? Not much about the features or code, like not this thing is buggy, but about the process. What would you like to do better, and how can the community help? That's the reason why I asked this. So maybe people at home can find out, well, why I could do that. We'll start with the Kamailio side. Something you don't like, the color of the logo.
I like everything.
You made it. So.
I typically say, like, if your favorite open source project is lacking some feature, it's because you haven't contributed yet, right?
Yes.
So Yeah, I mean, communication is always like maybe something that you try to do it better, but you are not sure you are doing. I mean, we are with this mailing list and channels, but sometimes people come and say, why you don't have an official Slack, right? And this is sometimes maybe facilitating for newcomers to have in more than 1-2 options available there, but adds overhead. So this should be maybe from the community more coming rather than from the project. Like they should self-organize and so maybe let's summarize it or conclude with providing a better education for the community to actually find their way or also guide the developers towards what's lacking in documentation. And
so explaining how people can help is your problem, point.
Sometimes, yeah, I think. Otherwise, at least SIP technology and everything is kind of like well established on the market, and I can't say we lack a feature. I mean, always is someone, do you support that or that, but it's not like a core or something fundamental missing there. I'll think about, maybe I'll have another answer a bit later. Like pass it left, right, or
I'll take it real quick. One thing everyone can do better is documentation. So that's an easy way to get into projects. I know that one open source project I contributed to, a lot of what I did was just documentation. Explain to other people how to use it right. Explain to other people how to configure it. And that's something we can always use, I think.
True.
Yeah, I mean, on the documentation side, at least with Kamailio, I'm sure OpenSIPS has similar, and everybody here that has questions, you know, it's SIP, right? So you run into a problem where it's not really, you know, a new person that has no concept of SIP, and, you know, it's very hard to create documentations that try to cover the 4 billion scenarios that you can try to implement, you know, where we have a carrier, we have a call center, we have just a person wanting a home phone or something. I mean, it's just, you know, at that point, then you have so much documentation that you have no documentation.
Yeah.
And
you just made a very good point. There are some open source projects where the problem is that there's conflicting versions. There's 5 web pages that seem like they're telling you to do the same thing, but it's slightly different, and only one of them works.
Or none of them work.
So it's Russian roulette with configuration. Yes. Just try one and see what happens.
Yes.
So one thing that comes to mind, speaking of things I don't like and would like to be improved, are definitely issues on GitHub which are rotting. So
yes.
Someone has a problem, they ask a question, and they stay there and wait, and then the stale bot slowly rottens the issue first, and then 2 weeks later it closes it, and it stays like that. So maybe one idea would be to start a discussion with the community and find some, explain ways, because it's quite easy to triage these issues, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people could do it. So that would be a first start.
Yeah, old issues, yeah. Plus, I always had experience with the Ruby framework, with people raising issues and the team asking a question back, like, so how do I reproduce this? And nothing ever comes out of it. And at some point, you just close it. You never hear from them again.
They don't come back again, yeah. Maybe they fixed their issue, probably.
Well, yeah.
I'm going to cheat a little bit and answer something that we've been fixing that struck me this week in particular. Someone here came up and said, hey, I found this interesting problem. And because I was in person, I was able to have a conversation, look at the issue. They found one issue, they had another issue. The engagement felt great. I don't get a lot of that nowadays. My time is focused on SignalWire and some other things, so I don't get that kind of engagement. And we started doing office hours for FreeSWITCH,
yeah.
so that hopefully some of us get a little bit more of that, a little bit more face-to-face time with people, because it lets people advocate for their own issues and get access in ways that dropping something in a bug tracker to die and not, it isn't so satisfying and useful for. And for me, I haven't gotten a lot of that face-to-face lately. You know, we didn't get a lot of face-to-face for a while.
Nobody did.
I like that we're fixing that. It's still something that like I haven't gotten recently until this week, and hopefully someone ends up with a problem fixed, and also they found something fascinating that's been an issue for, I don't know, as long as I can remember, probably 15 plus years.
Oh, yeah.
In the build, which I never knew, which probably will double our compile, cut in half our compile times once we put a fix in for it. Because of FaceTime, because of access, because of being able to kind of communicate.
That's great. What do you not like about FreeSWITCH?
Well, I would say, like, you ever have something at your house that you just don't fix, but you should? Like this light switch, I have to jiggle it to make it work,
Yeah.
but you just leave it that way. Sometimes these little things, FSTLI has a tab completion crash. It's been there for like 7+ years. libedit changed something one day and like created a bug that it's not necessarily our fault, so it's like hard to go chase down. That drives me insane. It happens all the time. It's like, especially you're trying to tab complete while everything's scrolling around you, and just CLI keeps crashing, so I hate that one. One day I'll get irritated enough to try and investigate it. But also, just in general, the sentiment of like focusing on little problems. Because we've kind of taken on a little more now. First we had FreeSWITCH, then we have a Shaken and Stir library now that we maintain that's being used in other projects. And then we have, when we did SignalWire, like all of the interface to SignalWire is also open source. So there's like a whole bunch of SDKs and clients, and examples are big. You know, like I'm the kind of person that examples make better documentation than instructions. Like I'm not a fan of like reading all the verbs and what each one of them means. I'd rather just see a program that kind of does the thing almost what I want, and then I learn from reading it. So I like having a repository of examples.
Yeah, sometimes a pure API documentation is useful if you're trying to do a specific thing, but if you're just trying to achieve a goal, it gets in the way, because it's just a list of 100 parameters and whatever.
Yeah, that's you've highlighted a lot of things here that we're changing and doing as well. For example, you know, we're going to discourse because of the thing Daniel outlined where the data gets lost. Now we're able to answer that and get it indexed and cataloged in a search engine, which will help onboard developers. Onboarding is something that, you know, getting your development environment set up, getting from 0 to a phone call. Because I know when I first did it, getting from that to a phone call was just like I was giddy.
Yeah.
I think that's an accomplishment. And it's like, I'm one of those people that learns from I go example to docs, and some people go docs to example. I'm lucky enough to have team members working in support with me that go both directions on that particular mindset. So when we come up with new ways to do things, or I have questions or need input, I can run it by the team and say, hey, you know, what's your mindset, where we're at, what do we need to do, what could make this easier? We have enough input all around to kind of get a better idea of, you know, an easier way to say things, how to frame it where it's better understood, because I've noticed our documentation may be one way, and it's clear to me what it says, but the person reading it is a completely different mindset, because they don't know what they don't know. And so when they're searching for a solution to a problem, they don't know what to search for. And I get the frustration of that. So we have to kind of bridge that gap as well in the open source world.
More examples in the end always
Yes,
helps.
always working examples. That's in what we're going to do with our examples that we're going to be publishing is I want to make sure that they have a unit test for the example as well, so that we know when our example gets broken the moment it's broken, and it's not out there months going.
It is easier than it used to be to do things like that.
Correct.
So certainly.
We have worked really hard on the you know, the frameworks and things to do the CI and the unit testing and all of these processes you have to wrap around managing, maintaining, and distributing an open source project. It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah, this has been, I think, the there's a common theme here, which is what we often echo on the show too, which is that very often what an open source project need is not someone coding features. It's documentation, it's examples, it's maybe just an email saying, hey, you know, that example doesn't work anymore because someone didn't notice. They just tried it and it changed and whatever. So everybody can get engaged, which is the important thing we should get out of here. So if you can code, that's still the best thing you can do.
And if you can't code, that's okay too.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to like dive in and help you. Like if you want to do documentation, I will gladly answer questions and help go through the process. If you want to know how to code, I can point you in the right direction. There's
Plus, engineers are generally bad at writing, so
Yes.
if help is
Yes.
greatly appreciated.
Yes, we will
Well,
appreciate it.
I mean, thank you very much, everybody. I've never had such a star-studded episode of ClueCon Weekly, so I want to thank you very much. So, and I would like to ask the audience for if there's any questions for the panelists, and if not, I will ask you for a big round of applause for Brian West, Anthony Minessale, Mike Jerris, Liviu Chircu, Jachen. Jachen Duschletta. I can't pronounce your last name, that's a problem. Daniel Mierla and Fred Posner. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. See you around. Enjoy the party.
See you at the party. Oh yeah, stay here. We have we have a ticket for a 3D printer right now. So there's. We're going to do the raffle for a 3D printer. I don't know. So I need a child or someone who's not very tall to pull, as usual rule for lotteries. But if nobody else wants to help, I just pull it myself. Great. Let's go. Okay. Last minute tickets. Yeah, we're going to. It's fine. Technically, the drawing hasn't happened yet, so. I'm going to have to give it an extra mix just to make sure. Last minute edition. So while I spin the thing here, remember that tomorrow morning we start at 9:15, and there's going to be a very interesting VC venture capital panel discussion. Because the other side of what we do is business and startups and software, and it's super interesting to know what's going on there and maybe learn how to fund your projects. I'll keep rolling this for a while just so we make sure everything is mixed up well. And remember, there's the gigabit reception.